Still Team Human with heart, empathy, and love. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Still Team Human. I am your host, Francesca DeMeglio. This is where we discuss how to keep people at the center of our work, even in the age of AI and other advanced technologies. This is where we elevate the human and understand how people can ensure that the new world fits around their best interests. Today, our guest, Julie Ann Whitten, is the author of The People Stack: Why Change Fails and What Actually Fixes It. And Julie describes herself as a confident transformation and change advisor. We'll explain that in just a few. She is a fabulous keynote speaker and an all around good person who I have gotten to work with a few times before. And I am really delighted to have her here with us today. Hello, Julie.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. And I was telling you before we started recording that I've been reading the book. It is such a fast read. It's an excellent book for anyone who is facing change. And you so beautifully tied it to your own personal experience in the introduction. I think it will be really relatable, even if the organization you're working at is not undergoing some major transformation right now. It still will resonate because of the changes we all go through every day, especially in this time and place. So, I first wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the qualifications you have for talking about change. And then we can talk more specifically about what some of the vocabulary that has come out of the book means.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me. So I'll just begin by saying I'm 25 years in the corporate world. My background is actually in communications. And along that journey, I stumbled upon this thing called change management, and it really changed the way I worked. As a communicator, I kept seeing projects and initiatives that would happen over and over again, and they weren't sticking. And when I found change management, it was like this light bulb went on, and I absolutely just fell in love with it. I went on to get my ProSci certification and my eCornell certification in that. And then lead a team of a Fortune 500 company in both realms of change management and employee communications. And then last fall, I decided to make the pivot and go out on my own to start my own practice. And along that journey, I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements and really helping clients. And I've been writing for the past year articles, thought leadership articles on LinkedIn. And what I didn't realize was that I was writing a book along the way. When I took a step back, said, really, what am I writing about? There were two buckets, and one was the organizational side of change and that journey and where people get stuck, and the other was the personal side of change with some things happening in my personal life and my family, and the parallel between the two were kind of made this match for the perfect storm of writing a book.
Yeah, I mean the combination, the parallels are undeniable, and you beautifully point that out in the introduction. Highly recommend you all pick up the book and take a look at it. So we mentioned in your introduction about you being a confidence leader. What does that mean? What is confidence?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about uncertainty in both my personal life and kind of the professional journey that I've had. And this confidence became something that I was labeled a while back, but it's this notion about staying grounded, the combination of calm confidence at the same time, and really the ability to build trust with different teams and how they have an affinity for you. But it's really all about pausing and really understanding. And this is usually where resistance tends to pop up. What is that really signaling? And then thinking about, okay, what is the perspective that we want to hear on this? How do we want to move forward? So it's really about, I say, being curious, really about what's going on, being grounded, right? To kind of ground yourself as well as the organization, and then being open and moving, helping people move forward, reminding people why we're doing certain things or moving in a direction. So that's kind of the embodiment of what confidence is all about.
That's great. So we have to define a couple of words for your book, which you do very well in the book. Tell the audience what the people stack is, because I found that to be a fascinating way to describe it. And then we can talk more specifically, because I have questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. So, first of all, companies are talking a lot about their tech stacks right now. You'll see that word everywhere. What is the makeup of the tech stack? And what I didn't see a lot was people talking about the human side of whatever that tech stack might be. So that's kind of where the idea for the
Mhm.
people stack came up. But I really believe it's this invisible human operating system that's kind of the foundation beneath any change or transformation. And within that, there's 5 different layers. And I say that trust needs to be present in each of those different layers. But I'll take a minute and just walk you through them. And basically, the idea is those layers of foundational from the bottom up. So if you have problems in one of those layers, the change really is not going to move forward and stick. So the first layer is really all about clarity. And I know this probably sounds super simple, not like rocket science, but it's not only ensuring that people understand what's happening, and that's both at the leadership and also at the employee level, but it's also helping them understand what the change requires of them. And it defines some of the expectations. So a lot of the red flags I'll see in this lane really have to do with leaders kind of living in the future and kind of embodying their strategy, really understanding where they're going, and then employees living in the present where they're seeing kind of, maybe seeing things for the first time or just don't have that clarity of what this is, as well as what they need to do with it, which is critically important. And then the second one is around alignment. Again, doesn't sound like rocket science, but it really ensures that systems and incentives and leadership behavior are supporting whatever the project and initiative and or transformation is. Sometimes we see this present itself in different ways where we have this new way of working where we're trying to move towards, but we have an old system that is rewarding old ways of working. So there's kind of um, some friction there, I guess I'll say, and that's not clear alignment, right? The next one from there is capability. And most people, their brain goes towards training, which absolutely this is helping people build the knowledge, but also I add on to that the confidence. And a lot of times we don't give people, or just what I've seen in my experience, the time and space to practice whatever it may be in a real environment, and or we see that training coming out too far ahead of when this go live is. Those really need to line up. But we know that employees right now are time poor. So there's just sometimes this lack of patience about having the capability be fully built out so people can practice it and feel confident. And what happens if they don't? Workarounds, right? And we see that all the time.
Mhm.
And then we have probably the most important layer of the people stack belief. And at the end of the day, the employee is going to decide whether they actually believe in whatever change it is happening, right? And that can be extremely hard. I mean, I think about different types of changes. I think about maybe reorganizations, reductions in force. And at the end of the day, the employee needs to decide if it's worth the effort to move forward. And that's really why this work has to be done to build that belief all the way through. And then there's the sustainment, which we often have organizations that have so many things going on that they'll move to the next shiny object. We hear it called all the time. And from a sustainment point, we want to embed it into the culture. So, how do we do that? And it's really about um, the leadership accountability piece, but making it part of the daily pattern of management, and having that become the new normal so it's sustained. And a lot of times we'll see projects and initiatives, leaders thinking that go live is the finish line. And for me, that's the starting line. And then, we see this kind of slide, kind of quiet slide back because the change isn't sustained. So I know that was a mouthful, but those are kind of the different layers of the
And I want, yes, and I want to talk specifically about a lot of what you talked about. In reading your book, one of the things that really touched me, and I think this goes beyond like the tactics of business, is the disconnect between the leaders and the employees. You expressed it just now as the leaders living in the future and the employees living in the present. But I think it just further divides the two groups, which is something that's happening in so many ways because of the socioeconomic factors, because of, even this political division in the country. And so I'm really wondering, do you have any thoughts on how we can kind of get back together and the leaders and the employees can, I don't want to say become one because obviously there are still hierarchical organizations. I know there's some people trying to be flat and whatever, but most of the organizations have some kind of hierarchy. So how can we kind of help bring these groups together and how can maybe change management be a force for that, a force for good in that bringing and unionizing us all?
I love this question because I have deep appreciation
I
for
do
the legwork that needs to be done behind that happening. And I ask myself, well, what's preventing it from happening? And a few things barriers that need to be removed come to mind. So the first one is fear. And I know that that might sound a little bit strange, but I've been a part of many projects where there is this fear of asking the end users that will be using whatever process or system about what they think. And it just, in my mind, it doesn't make sense, but I really feel like there's this underlying fear of this is going to slow us down, or they might ask us something that we don't know the answer to. And I say to that, good, because we need to think through all of the different pieces. So, when I think about, okay, how do you move past that? It's really allowing the time and the space to work through some of those challenges and involve the different levels of any organization, especially the end users. And from kind of a leadership level, that's back to that confident leader, right? Of being open, being curious. Because I think honestly, you don't know what you don't know, right? You might know all about the technology change that you're going to make. It might be the best system in the world, but if it hasn't been grounded in reality or lived in the real environment, been tested by the people that are going to use it, you're going to struggle. So I always say, yes, you do have to allow time for that, but it's an investment that you won't have time on the other end of trying to undo or fix or correct or whatever.
it also furthers the possibility that you'll be able to sustain it.
Yeah.
And I just feel like you're a communications person. That's why you can tell that clearly through the book and in your response just there. I feel like a lot of people just aren't communicating on both ends. And of course, it's harder for the employee because they would have to take a lot of initiative and take a big risk to approach a leader about this. It would be much
Yeah.
easier for the leaders to go to them. But it's true that many leaders don't know what their employees are doing on a day-to-day basis, how they're using these processes. I mean, you and I met because you spoke at a process excellence event that I produced, and that's one of the biggest problems that when you're trying to improve processes is that you don't exactly know step by step what's going to happen. So I say all the time, every event I ever went to, they said garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
It's the same idea with change. If you're not asking the questions and don't know, you're going to produce the garbage and then you're not going to get people to buy into it. Another thing you talked about is trust, why that's so important. I'd love to hear you talk more about that because I do feel like we're in a trust crisis, especially in the workforce. Gone are the days of people working at the same place for 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And if you do, that's an anomaly, and I bless you. But most people don't end up doing that. There are layoffs, your best friend gets cut out of the system. People leave because they feel like demoralized, and that there is a real break in trust. I feel like this system you've put forth could work to build trust up again. What is holding us back? Why is the trust not coming back?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a silver bullet here, but I'll kind of share what I've experienced. So I do think, especially with what you described, many organizations are very fragile when it comes to their trust right now. And that might be because they've gone through some changes in reorganizations, some mergers and acquisitions, or just a kind of a sleuth of failed changes too. Any one of those things could erode trust. And then when you're trying to layer things on top of that, it's a very difficult thing to do.
Hmm.
So I do think it's kind of taking a step back, doing some sort of cultural assessment. Where are we with this? Where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? Really, trust is built, in my opinion, by doing what you say you're going to do. And I do think that active and visible sponsorship is critical. It's the number two thing of why projects succeed is having strong, active, visible sponsorship. So the leaders need to be present and they need to be engaged. And we know that leaders are very busy people. They can't be everywhere, right? But I think a good change management strategy will have those different touch points carved out of when the leader needs to be present, when they need to be listening and asking questions, when they need to be sharing some things that might be difficult conversations. So I do think there's places where you could strategically plot out how can I build the trust, but I also think that it takes time, right? It takes consistency, and that's not something that's built overnight.
I think that's such a good point you bring up about consistency. We don't have that, a lot of that nowadays. There's so much uncertainty, and then that ends up, you get thrown a curveball and there is no consistency anymore. That is why there are breaks in trust, I think. But what you do in the book is describe how you have to build trust into each layer of the people stack and how vital that is. Honestly, if people don't trust you, they are never going to adopt these changes you want to make.
Exactly.
And you're either going to end up with them, slipping backward as you've described it in the book, or leaving, or just leaving. Or failing to succeed, and then you force them to leave, which is probably the worst case scenario. So another thing that I found that really resonated with me was when you were talking about what this does when a leader has like planned out all of the change that has to happen, understands strategically why it's going to happen, and then the employee just is hearing, kind of like a completely different scenario. They're hearing, okay, I've just lost all my confidence because this is means everything I've learned up to this point is being undone, and now I know nothing. So what can we all do to protect our confidence and kind of succeed, regardless of the change being put in front of us?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So the question I ask myself from that is, why is this so hard? Why is this so difficult, right? And really, when you unpack it, I call it the three C's. There's three things that change threatens that make it a little bit difficult. One is confidence. So employee is wondering, will I still be good at my job based on whatever XYZ change this is? The second one is certainty. Okay, well, now that I've learned this information, what's going to happen next? And then the third one is control. Do I even have a say in this? And a lot of times they don't. So I put that in one column. The other column I'm thinking about, we need to help people in within organizations build this competency about how do you create stability through uncertainty? Because I don't know about you, but the last kind of 5 years of my life have been complete uncertainty. And I think about this pandemic that we all went through, right? All uncertainty. I think about, what AI has happening right now and how that will continue to change. One thing that we know for sure is things will continue to evolve. So I just don't feel like we have the mindset and have an opportunity to help organizations build this mindset about being more agile. We talk about it, but we practice it? And how do we help people with that? And I actually think about it from the lens of yoga, to be honest with you, because I practice a lot of yoga. Is like when you're learning a new yoga pose, what do you do, right? How do you kind of learn to do that? And it's a series of dipping your toe in and trying things and making slight adjustments and then going back to something that's familiar. And I really feel like that same framework could work in an organization is we teach people how do you become more comfortable that things are going to continue to change. So I do think it can translate into our personal lives as well.
Yeah, definitely. I love that comparison to yoga. And I mean, anything you do new, right? You do go backwards. You try to relate it to something you already know to get yourself comfortable with whatever you're learning. And we can all still learn. I want to remind people, old dogs can learn new tricks. I'm a testament to that. Um, you brought up AI, and I was going to save this for a little later, but since we already brought it up, I think it's so relevant as I was reading your book, just thinking about that now. There's been a lot of talk about how even people are even sabotaging the AI transformation projects that their companies are imposing on them because they're fearful about it taking their jobs and whether they're going to be deemed incompetent now. That's really what this is about. It's taking away our confidence. How do you see this playing out, and what can companies do to ensure they're not going to be sabotaged as people get these AI initiatives put in front of them?
Yeah, so I take a step back and I think about any change that we go through. We go through this emotional journey in the change management world. It's known as the Fisher model. We're going to travel through it as individuals, no matter what. And part of the beginning of that emotional journey is around fear, right? So we can see a lot of that happening right now. I think one of the biggest challenges with AI is there's not a clear shared vision. A lot of times, as companies are kind of trying different things, sometimes they might be trying to, I guess, repair or maybe kind of make more things more efficient, but there's a root cause problem that can't be fixed by the AI, right? So they're almost like throwing money at a problem that they haven't quite solved yet, and it's not going to solve it. So I do think we are going to continue to see change because of AI, and it is going to change the different jobs that we have available, right? We know things are going to change. That's what we know. But what we haven't figured out yet, and I don't think organizations are quite there, is how are we going to use it, right? That's one of the things I've been working on right now. So there's different buckets that falls in. The individual, how are they going to use AI to leverage the things that they do well and keep them as an individual and enhance the things that might be low value and kind of automate that piece of it. And then as a team, kind of the similar questions, and then sort of layer that on as an organization. So I don't know that I've seen organizations kind of roll up their sleeves and figure that out. And I think because we don't have that information, it's really hard for people to grasp as they get new project initiatives saying, adopt this AI tool. Here's Copilot. Here you go. We're going to use it for this and that. And I think it's great that people are playing around and leaning in and learning it. But again, I don't think organizations have done a good job of figuring out how they want to leverage it. And maybe it's about like, again, we were back to dipping your toe in. Okay, first we're going to figure out how this enhances you as an individual, and what does that mean? And I think the smart people at the same time are taking a look at this as an opportunity and really learning as much as they can about AI, and that will only benefit them as things move forward.
So true. I just think AI is the change of our times. I do think it's going to eventually be as transformative as they say. I don't think it's there yet, so I feel like we all have to take a deep breath and relax. But I understand the emotional roller coaster. And I wanted to bring up one of the first presentations, the one first events that you did for me was about the emotional roller coaster. You just talked about fear throughout the book. You talk about a lot of the emotions. And in the introduction, I think it was the introduction of the first chapter, you talk about career grief. You describe it as the emotional response to realizing that the version of you that once felt competent and confident no longer fits the environment in the same way. I thought that was really poignant. I could relate to it, and I bet people listening will relate to that. Tell me some more about the emotions we're experiencing with these changes and how to like get in touch with our emotions and not have all this anxiety. I need that advice myself.
We all do. We all do. So
I love
absolutely
it.
no judgment. I remind myself on a daily basis. Let me just take a second and kind of walk through what that curve looks like. And anybody that's familiar with like the 7 stages of grief will
Yes.
just simply understand. So, as something kind of unfolds, any sort of change could be personal, could be professional. The first thing, somebody might get a little excited about finally something's going to change, or maybe not, depends upon what the change is. But I almost feel like there's this deep breath, and people are like, okay, so what does this mean for me? What am I going to do with this? And then that's where it comes in. Once you get to that what ifing, there's your fear right there. And then from there, people tend to slide down this curve. Sometimes there's, guilt or shame or threat. Sometimes that even presents itself as anger. And I know we can talk about the animal personas a little bit later. Anger is a secondary emotion, so there's always something underneath of it. And then from there, people can travel off into different paths. They can go off into denial, they can go off into hostility. Some people go into depression. Some people just stay in what we call that valley of despair and they don't come out. But eventually, as people kind of move towards this gradual acceptance, they move up the other side of the mountain. And they get on board of how they move forward. And that moving forward could be fully adopting the change or it could be creating the workaround. We don't really know. And an important thing to remind people of on this journey is something can happen along the way, and then they could slide all the way back to the beginning. So let's say it's a technology adoption, but the technology is clunky and it doesn't work all the way back to the beginning. So imagine I just explained that linearly, but an organization that has many different things happening and there's all sorts of journeys. And then think about your personal life, and that's probably enough to make all of our heads explode.
Yes. Truly explode. But yeah, I just thought that was such a great thing to discuss, and you put to words what a lot of people feel that we haven't really talked about. I,
Yeah.
we have talked about this before. I just think in the corporate world, it's almost like we're not supposed to have emotions, and so we kind of are taught to put that aside when in reality, any transformation, it brings up fear, it brings up grief. You mentioned
Yes.
the valley of despair. We all want to climb out of it. Nobody wants to stay there. So yeah, I think that was a very interesting thing. You mentioned the animal personas. Why don't
Yeah.
you tell them about that?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, these emotions present themselves in different ways. And after you've been doing this a while, you tend to recognize them. So there's two layers. There's what I call the different animal personas, which I'll walk through kind of each of those. And then underneath, it's the behavior that's driving those personas. And those I label work attachment styles. So I'll go through some of the personas, just a few of them. So we have the wolf. And each of the personas have a negative and a positive quality. The wolf can be extremely negative and rally their pack, or they can be your biggest cheerleader. Another common one is the ostrich. So the ostrich goes and buries their head in the sand. They can be
I know.
extremely avoidant. You can see exactly what path they travel on that curve, but they're also extremely cautious. And then two other ones that are also pretty popular. There's 8 in total. The owl. The owl is usually somebody with deep institutional knowledge that tends to be extremely controlling, but they're also extremely passionate. And then we have the beaver, and the beaver is famous for building up barriers. So we can't do it because of this and this and this, but they're
Mhm.
also the person that's going to uncover risks. So those are a few of the animals that you'll see present themselves throughout change.
Yeah, and you can figure out which animal you are. I was going through my head. I could be a couple of them depending on the situation.
Yeah, I have an assessment bill because it's so interesting. So what I usually like to do is let people take the assessment before I describe them because people tend to self-label.
Of course, of course.
And whenever I do this workshop, it's really funny. I put all the animals up on the screen, and the immediate reaction is they're thinking about somebody that they either live with or work with. But not thinking about themselves, right? And one of the things I really love about this, and to your question earlier about how do we help people, is
Yeah.
understanding how you show up in the face of change is really important. And then you'll start to recognize it in others.
Yeah, I think, and another word we often talk about nowadays, resiliency, and it's so related to everything that we've talked about here today. I think that people are really struggling. Resiliency is hard. That's not something easy we all come by. And I think people are really trying to figure out how to get good at that, at being
Mm.
resilient because of the times we live in. I do think there is a lot of just so much change at a pace we've never seen before, uh,
Yeah.
that it requires that. So I think all of this was very important. Did you have any final messages or the big takeaway you want the audience to have?
Yeah, so that's the how it's presenting itself, but the why is also really important. So they're acting this certain way. And this is great if you're a parent too, if you see your child acting this way, or even a significant other, as well as coworkers. Why? And so there's these drivers underneath. There's four of them. There is anxious. There is avoidant, secure, and disorganized. And disorganized is a little bit of an interesting label, but it's basically a combination between anxious and avoidant, and they kind of swing back and forth. So even though the animal persona might be the same, the driver might be different. And it's really as you understand, okay, well, great, I know so and so is an ostrich and they're anxious. What do I do with them? And that's some of the work that I've been doing to kind of have leader prescriptions of like how does this person need to be either handheld or helped through change based on what you're seeing, as well as what's driving that.
I think another important point to make is that you talk about how the leader sets the tone essentially. They can talk about learning being the most important, you mentioned in the book, but if they're bringing up short-term achievements every meeting, the employee is getting a totally different message.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point to make too. It really depends on how the leader is behaving also. That kind of sets you up for success or failure. Is that an accurate assessment?
100%. So I call this chicken little syndrome or emotional contagion. But basically, if your leader is running around panicking that the sky is falling, that is going to translate all the way down the organization. And it's not that the leader can't be, worried or anxious about things, but they need to be grounded about it
Mhm.
because what they say and do really does affect the way the team views what's going on as well. And that's back to that confident leader.
Yes, they need confidence. There you have back full circle at the end. So, Julie is the author of The People Stack: Why Change Fails and What Actually Fixes It. You can pick up the book on Amazon. I did. It's an excellent read and it's very fast. So, this will be on my summer reading list. We'll be hearing about that very soon. And Julie, how can they contact you if they're interested in your work or any of your consulting?
Yes, thank you so much. So my website is juliewhittenconsulting.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. I do have two newsletters that I have. One is around the People Stack, which we've talked a lot about today. The other one is around Big Girl Panties Diaries, and that talks about life and leadership lessons around personal change.
And if I'm not mistaken, I received the People Stack newsletter today when I went
You
on.
did.
Very exciting since I was going to be talking to you. We thank you for having us. We appreciate you and we hope to continue this conversation again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.